On January 2nd, 1974, U.S. President Richard Nixon signs the controversial Emergency Highway Energy Conservation Act. This limits highway speeds nationwide to a maximum of 55 miles per hour. The law also requires 55 to be emphasized on speedometers and 85 to be the maximum speed shown on those same speedometers. This causes all kinds of consternation for many Americans, especially Sammy Hagar, who simply cannot drive 55. Before this law, individual states set their own speed limits, based on the principle of reserved powers in the U.S. Constitution, which essentially leaves powers to state and federal governments and to the people that are not specifically enumerated in the document as federal powers. Some examples of the Constitution's enumerated federal powers are coining money and declaring war. Needless to say, the Constitution, written in 1787, does not outline any specific federal powers for motor vehicle speed limits. In fact, before this controversial 1974 Highway Act, Nevada and Montana had highways with no defined speed limits. So why did Congress pass this controversial law? Well, the West supported Israel in the 1973 Yom Kippur War. OPEC retaliated with an oil embargo. This meant no shipments of oil to the US, Japan, or Western Europe. Not surprisingly, there were oil shortages in the US, and gasoline prices skyrocketed at filling stations nationwide. In fact, the average price per gallon in 1974 went all the way up to 53 cents, from an average of just 39 cents in 1973. The 1974 Emergency Highway Energy Conservation Act was passed because 55 was deemed to be more fuel efficient than faster speeds. Some states opted to go even lower, setting their speed limits at just 50 miles per hour. In 1987, there was an effort to repeal the act, but safety advocates pushed against this, claiming that the lower speed limits since 1974 had reduced highway fatalities. Ultimately, Congress decided to modify the law slightly to allow up to 65 miles per hour on certain limited access rural roads only. The law was then fully repealed 8 years later in 1995, which meant each state was again able to determine its own speed limits. Today, no state has set its maximum statewide speed limit to 55 miles per hour, although some states do have a limit at 55 or even lower on certain stretches of highway. So where is the speed limit the highest? Well, in some counties in Texas, you can now go 85 miles per hour. Here are other events that happened today in history. In 1492, the Kingdom of Granada, the last Moorish foothold in Spain, falls to the Spanish crown's forces. In 1926, the first edition of the influential British music magazine Melody Maker is published. In 1965, University of Alabama quarterback Joe Namath spurns the NFL to sign with the AFL's New York Jets. In 1969, the Beatles begin working on what becomes their final album, Let It Be, and its accompanying film. In 1980, reacting to the invasion of Afghanistan, Jimmy Carter recalls the U.S. ambassador from Moscow. In 2020, Trump announces that fruit and dessert-flavored e-cigarettes will be removed from the U.S. market. In 2023, Buffalo Bills safety Damar Hamlin suffers a cardiac arrest and collapses on the field in Cincinnati. And now, it's time for our Today in History quiz. Which archaeologist discovered the tomb of Egyptian pharaoh King Tut? Heinrich Schliemann, Arthur Evans, Howard Carter, or Leonard Woolley? Think you know the answer? Drop your guesses in the comments below. Find out if you're right tomorrow on Today in History.